All right, now we move on to Pietro. Nice to see you.
Yeah,
Thanks
it's
for
great to
joining
be
us.
here.
And you got a preview into the questions that we're going to ask you. Although your platform, your background is much different than Greg's, and you have different ways of just validating data. But let me start with this similar questions of thinking back to your former 21-year-old self, what you thought you were going to be doing with your future, what you were doing, and then how it came to be that you've created such an amazing platform called Stall Catchers.
Yeah, that's always a fun question because, it's those are sort of, the times we look back on fondly when we were in college or high school. And I remember at that time, I was very much, I was self-taught in computer programming. I got a home computer, as they were called at the time, when I was 13, and I started programming just because I enjoyed it. And but then I realized, I was pretty much fascinated by humans because I realized there were certain things I couldn't program the computer to do. And I thought, well, why is it so easy for me to do this? How can I so easily hold a conversation with another person, but I can't get my computer to hold a conversation with me? And I think that sort of drove me in the direction of this field of cognitive science, where it's really about trying to understand how different systems think. And at that time, the internet was starting to become a thing that not just scientists knew about, but everyone was starting to use for email and stuff. And I kind of I had been studying neural networks at the time. We called them connectionist models. As a way to better understand how the human brain works. And so I had this model of a bunch of nodes connected to each other in a neural network, very present in my mind, just as the internet was becoming a thing. And I thought, oh, well, the internet is kind of like a brain too, because it's connecting all these nodes together that are people. And wouldn't it be cool, in this kind of fanciful way, if we could make a big brain out of the internet, connecting all these people together, like each person is a neuron. And I had no idea how something like that could happen. And I had no idea that someday I would be developing systems that start to do exactly that kind of thing, which is what citizen science allows us to do. But I think that was the seed that was planted for me.
We were doing very different things at the
I did go to an occasional party too. I mean, if I have to be truthful, but.
So tell us a little bit about Stall Catchers, please, and with an eye towards, data quality, how and why people should get involved in it, and ultimately what it's trying to do, what kind of questions it's trying to solve.
Yeah, so Stall Catchers came about because I met a university professor at Cornell working in the biomedical engineering department named Chris Schaefer, who was studying Alzheimer's disease. And basically, they had this problem where the kind of data they were generating were just very difficult to analyze. There was a ton of data. They would take these images, actually movies inside the mouse brain, and then they'd have to go through and find all these tiny little capillary vessels and count the ones that were either flowing or stalled to try to figure out how blood flow in the brains of these mice were related to Alzheimer's disease. So they do an imaging session on a mouse that might take a week, and then they would spend an entire year trying to analyze the data. So this sounded like an opportunity to sort of divide and conquer. What if we could take this task of trying to figure out which of these vessels was flowing or stalled and turn it into a game kind of that anybody could play without any specialized training? And if we could get thousands of people playing this game, then maybe we could take a year's worth of analysis and turn it into, a couple months or a week, if we got enough people doing it. And so that was the goal, to help speed up this, this Alzheimer's research. And so actually I can show you, if you'd like, what Stall Catchers looks like. And let's see here. I tried to queue it up, and I know it's here somewhere. Here we go. All right, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so this is Stall Catchers. I'm going to refresh the screen. So what we did is we created this interface that we call a virtual microscope, and we actually kind of stole this idea from another citizen science project. And I think that's actually a really good thing to do. because when something works in citizen science, we want to capture that idea and reuse it wherever it makes sense to do that. So there was another project called Stardust at Home that was about looking for tiny particles of stardust trapped in aerogel that came back from a spaceship that was flown through the tail of a comet. And they had the same kind of virtual microscope interface. And so in their case, you were sort of zooming in and out through aerogel. In our case, as I move the slider back and forth, you're zooming in and out through images inside the brain of a mouse. And what we do is we draw an outline around an individual capillary segment. And the idea is, as you move this green line back and forth, you're trying to figure out whether blood is flowing through that capillary segment or not. And in this example, you can see these little black dots. Those are red blood cells. And as you move this slider back and forth, they do seem to be moving in a particular direction, which to me looks like starting from here and moving down this way. So I would say it's flowing. And hey, I got it right. So I got a bunch of points. And you know, who isn't happy to get lots of points? I'm nowhere near these folks on the leaderboard who get a lot more points than I do. They're actually much better at this test than I am. I'm kind of lucky I got this one right. So then you go on to the next one. And this one's obviously trickier. This is a very noisy image. And so this question comes up. When I answered the last one, the system somehow knew that I'd given the right answer. Well, if the system already knows what the answer is, then why is it even asking me, right? So this has to do with our approach to data quality. That was what we call a calibration sample, where we have a set of these vessels where we already know the answer, and we show them to people as a way to figure out how people are performing at a given moment in time, and also to help train people. So if I'd gotten it wrong, then I would have learned something from that. I could have scrolled down to look at feedback from other people about that vessel. In this case, it doesn't tell me if I'm correct or not, which means it's a research vessel. This is actually a vessel segment from the current data set. And so my answer is going to actually help decide whether this vessel is flowing or stalled for the purpose of the Alzheimer's research. And what will happen is, once enough people answer about the same vessel, all those answers will get combined into one crowd answer, kind of like what Greg was talking about, where he had pairs of people going to the same observation point, and then those paired observations would be corroborated against each other. We do something similar, and this is all part of this kind of wisdom of crowds approach. And so eventually, in a few days, I may get a whole bunch of points if my answer agrees with someone else's, and that's this redeem button here. So these are points from vessels I annotated a few days ago that actually ended up agreeing with some other people. And this is also, this is a common game mechanic for anyone who's played casual games on your smartphone, like Clash of Clans. You know, they have this thing where resources build up while you're away from the game, and then you're sort of compelled to come back so you can collect your resources. And here we don't really make you wait intentionally, but it ends up kind of working that way, where you want to come back and get all those points. So people do tend to come back to the game. And so we really do draw on techniques and ideas from the gaming industry, as well as science, to make it all work.
Amazing. So thank you for showing this to us too. So I don't know that I've ever made it my way out of like the testing part of it, now that I see what it is there an average number of like, hey, 10 people have to see the same thing that you're seeing before it's research grade data?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think each project handles this kind of wisdom of crowds approach a bit differently. In our case, we just started out by taking a simple average of the answers of everybody. And it turned out that to provide research quality data, we had to ask 20 different people about the same vessel. That worked, that provided high data quality, but it seemed inefficient. So we realized there were a couple ways to improve our methods. One thing we did is, by keeping track of people, we know we can kind of sense a person's expertise based on how well they're doing. And so we'll assign a higher weight to that person's answer than someone who's just starting out in the game. And this has the added benefit of taking the pressure off people who really don't know what they're doing yet. And they're just trying to figure it out, because people can get stressed and think, oh, I'm going to mess up the research. Well, we actually created the game in such a way that you can't. Even if you try, you literally can't mess up the data. And we've sort of tested that. We've asked people, do your best, or do your worst.
Unless you found 19 other evil friends, all 20.
Yeah, don't give anyone any ideas there. Actually, that's interesting. I don't know if that would work or not. I'll have to think about that one. But in the end, by using some more sophisticated methods, we came up with a wisdom of crowds approach, such that only about 4 people have to look at a vessel in order to get the same data quality that we got before with 20 people. So that's another way to sort of speed up how fast you're analyzing the data. You can either get more people analyzing the data or require fewer people to do it. So just going from 20 to 4 meant that we were analyzing data 5 times faster.
Amazing. And let's talk about that too, with the speed of this. It's just averaging out how long it would have taken or does take the professor, the researchers, the graduate students at Cornell to sift through this information versus what you've put out here on the citizen science platform. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can do better than tell you. I can show you. This is just, it's sort of funny, but if you look up here at this blue bar, we keep track of how much of the data set has been analyzed. So the current data set is actually completely analyzed. And the problem is, and it's a good problem to have, is that Stallcatchers is actually analyzing data faster than the researchers can give it to us. So it used to take them 6 months to a year to analyze a single data set. And now we're analyzing a data set on average, I'd say in about a month, sometimes faster. And we're picking up steam. So it turns out there's a new bottleneck in their system. So do you see this big black space here in this movie? This is called a mask, and people at the Cornell lab had to put masks here in order to hide regions of the brain that they didn't want to be included in the analysis because it wasn't really capillaries. It would have contaminated the data. And somebody has to go and manually add all these masks. So it turns out right after this interview, I have another meeting with a graduate student at Dartmouth University and a member of the Schaefer Nishimura lab at Cornell. And we're going to work together to come up with a new citizen science task so we can crowdsource the masking and speed it up so that we can get data into the system faster and keep the research going even faster.
Amazing. Thank you. And thank you for summarizing that. Question now about the use of the data. So ultimately, what will the scientists at Cornell do with this type of data? Are they using it already, and for what purpose?
Yeah, they are very much using the data, and it is advancing the science of Alzheimer's disease. So so we've analyzed I think 15 to 20 data sets already, and typically what they'll do is they'll take a chemical compound or a drug, and they'll introduce it to half the mice. So then they'll image the mice with and without the drug. And then we'll go in and through playing stall catchers, we'll count the stalls, and we'll see if taking the drug makes those stalled capillaries unblocked so that they're flowing again. So that's essentially what stall catchers does, is just trying to count and figure out whether or not these drugs are making a difference for these mice. And sometimes the drugs that are given to the mice are not what we would envision as a treatment for Alzheimer's. It's a drug that tells us something about what's causing the capillaries to stall. And by accumulating information about a lot of these different chemicals, we can start to paint a picture about what's actually happening at a molecular level in terms of this capillary stalling effect. And that helps us figure out how to come up with a safe treatment that could be used for humans. And as it turns out, there is one of the compounds tested looks like it has some potential and may undergo human clinical trials now because of stall catchers. If it worked out, and it's a big if, because what happens to mice often doesn't work the same with humans, but if it did work out, it would potentially be the first effective treatment for Alzheimer's disease. So we're keeping our fingers crossed.
Amazing. Dan, do you have any questions? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I held down my space bar, but it didn't work. Pietro, I know this is a very, obviously a very popular project game. Can you talk about, you know, when Greg was talking, you know, for bald eagles, you go to certain places. This is a global project. You have players from all over the world. Can you talk about that in terms of it? And then just curious, one thing that always impressed me about stall catchers is the amount of scientific information that you can learn by going to the site. So I just want to ask you about that and why that's important.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate those questions. So, I mean, so Alzheimer's disease obviously affects a lot of people around the world. It doesn't discriminate. And for this reason, it's been a great opportunity for us to engage in the international community. So we've conducted what we call catchathons, because it's stall catchers and you're trying to catch these stalls. We've had international catchathons where we've had participation from the six inhabited continents, and yeah, at one point we even tried to get the International Space Station involved. That didn't work out, but we haven't given up. And what's great is that we often will have these kind of live Zoom hangouts with all the different countries that are participating. So no matter, you know, what your ideology is, what kind of political beliefs, Alzheimer's disease is about being human, right? And it crosses, you know, anyone who's been touched by the disease in one way or another can appreciate that it's all about just being human. And we all come together across all different divides to engage in this kind of activity. And it's such a wonderful feeling to be part of something like that, to a truly global and international event where everybody just wants the same outcome, which is to find, you know, some kind of cure treatment for the disease. So our original goal was to get 30,000 players for stall catchers. Today we have 34,000. I think it was just last year that we finally, after I guess 4 years, kind of hit our target. And it turns out that was exactly the level at which we started to bypass, you know, the lab's ability to give us data. So so that was kind of miraculously on the mark for what we needed. I think you had another question. Oh, it was about the educational content on the site. Yeah, so I mean, we're very connected, I think, to our community of players. We have an online chat. I don't know if I showed you that. I can quickly go back and bring that up so you can see. The site isn't too busy right now because people see that the data set has been verified, and we do use additional data, but it doesn't have quite the same impact, and our players know that. So they kind of say, okay, let us know when you've got new data ready. But we do have this online chat, and folks look forward to finding each other on here. It's a pretty tight-knit community and a very welcoming community to new people. And we have a few players like Mike Caprero here, whose username is Caparam with a star, and they're kind of like community mentors. And if there's something going on with the platform, or if there are any issues, you know, these mentors come and notify us. And a lot of the features and design of the platform itself was informed by player suggestions. So it's really been, you know, a team effort, I think, to borrow Greg's words. I think citizen science really lends itself to, you know, kind of appreciating all the different stakeholders and you know, what they have to contribute and what they get out of it. We have put a lot of effort into communicating the science of stall catchers because, you know, we want to give back to our contributors. So we know a lot of people are doing this because they care about Alzheimer's disease, but we also have a lot of students in classrooms that are playing stall catchers, and they're doing it as a kind of a science activity. So we explain, how does playing stall catchers actually, help find a treatment? And we've created some videos. We have some very talented people on the team who are good at explaining things. And there's something kind of for whatever level you want. If you want to if you're a biology major and you can understand this stuff, you can go a level deeper and really get into it. And finally, we actually have papers, that have been published in academic journals about the research being done in stall catchers. And we actually credit the stall catcher community as co-authors on those papers when the journals will let us. And so what we do is we'll say stall catchers players right up there with all the other co-authors, and then it's a hyperlink. And if you click on it, you get a list of every single person who contributed to that specific study, which we keep track of.
Amazing. Yeah, so by the time students watch this, or maybe after watching this, they will be asked to also give some reflections about how they may define science based on some of their readings and these discussions. Start to think about how platforms like yours and Greg's try to mitigate and make sure that the data is useful for science. And they'll also be doing your project. So I hope they have fun with it, and with a deeper understanding of the science that they're advancing. Maybe they have a loved one, or maybe a relative or a friend that is afflicted with Alzheimer's, which would be an additional motivation to get involved, stay involved, share the game and the platform with their friends and family to get involved too. So we're so grateful, Pietro, that you joined us, that you have the platform, that you're helping to advance scientific research that matters to so many, and that you're making an impact too. Dan, do you have
Thank you.
comments?
No, I just want to say thank you as well. It's always very incredible to see what goes into this, and behind that, the dedication of the people that are making it happen. So thank you.
Thanks a lot. Well, and you're both part of the team. You've both helped stall catchers in many ways over the years, and we certainly think of you as part of our team. I represent you that way to others, and I should probably mention, just in case anyone's curious, we have a couple new projects in our pipeline that are related to stall catchers, because they both deal with dementia. One of them is going to examine dementia related to sickle cell disease, and in particular, there are researchers at the University of Pittsburgh who are looking at what's called venous tortuosity. That's not to be, it's not torturous, it's tortuous. So nobody's getting tortured. There are these very twisty blood vessels that are sometimes more prevalent in the brains of human patients with sickle cell disease. And the question is, what impacts does that have on cognition? So it's not widely known, but people often have lifelong issues with cognitive impairments that come and go when they have sickle cell disease. So it's trying to tackle that aspect. And one thing we're finding is, and by we, I mean all the biomedical researchers who are studying different kinds of dementia, is that they're all interrelated. And so they call it mixed etiology, that there's the similar and related underlying factors to all the dementias. And sometimes one kind of dementia will turn into another. You could have Alzheimer's dementia and Parkinsonian dementia all kind of happening because they have similar underlying causes. So this sickle cell disease study will actually help us better understand Alzheimer's disease as well. And then just quickly, the other one that we're planning is looking at why folks so non-white Hispanics tend to have a higher prevalence of Alzheimer's disease than white people, and we don't really know why. So there's a whole body of work being done to investigate this further, to try to look at the underlying causes for this. And this actually would involve, instead of looking at blood vessel twistiness like the sickle cell one, in this one there would actually be tissue samples, postmortem tissue samples from the brains of people who died from Alzheimer's dementia, And then we'd be trying to look at those slides in the citizen science task and find the amyloid plaques or the tau tangles, which are the hallmark characteristics of this. So if you're interested in studying dementia, we're going to have lots of different ways to learn about it, and hopefully get better treatments for it.
Fantastic. Same platform. We use the same underpinning.
Exactly. Yeah, we're gonna reuse as much as we can. Same leaderboards, same chat box, the whole works, and then people can sort of flip back and forth and maybe share their points. Yeah, should be fun and hopefully useful.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you, Pietro. Have a great weekend, and
thank you.
We'll see our students next week.
Sounds great. Yeah, good luck to your students, to everyone watching, and thanks again for having me. It's nice to see you both.